Hey guys, welcome to the start of another restoration project. This time it's going to be an Airline tombstone radio from the mid-30s. This belongs to the same gentleman that dropped off the Stromberg Carlson TV for me to work on. He figured while I had the TV, I might as well drop off the radio as well. I mentioned this briefly in an earlier video where I previewed some upcoming projects, and some of the astute viewers pointed out that dial hand seems to be broken off, and yeah, that does appear to be the case. So we've got 3 pointers here. One's for volume, one's for tone, and the station pointer should have another pointer going up top here. Maybe the other half is broken off somewhere inside, I don't know. I have not looked inside the chassis yet. I know there's a bag with some knobs. They're mismatched, but I think at least one of them is original. Grill cloth, I'm pretty darn sure, is a replacement as well. But I think the rest of it is pretty much original. Cabinet's in pretty good condition. I don't think there's veneer loss around the bottom. I think that's just how it was, just kind of plain. And I got the nice inlay up here. So let's get this turned around and take a look at the chassis. Alright, here it is. Here's the bag I mentioned. There's a model 62-131. It's a little crusty inside. This is the power cord. Very likely the original. Actually in decent condition. I'll probably be replacing it anyways. We can reuse this plug. If not, certainly have others of exactly the same style I could use to replace it with. Speaker plugs in. It's a nice touch, so I think working on this a little bit easier. Speaking of working on it, I can already see that somebody worked on it at some point in the past because we've got a new cap in here. Looks like the original electrolytics are gone. There are probably 2 of them mounted up in here. That's a shame. Looks like the dial lamp fell out. I think this whole thing is, it's just kind of floating in here. I don't think it's attached to anything. Or maybe there's just one bolt holding it in, so I'll see if I can pull this out and we can get a closer look at it. Here's a look inside the cabinet after the chassis has been pulled out. So there's a metal plate on the bottom with a grounding lug going to it. Maybe that's to provide shielding underneath the bottom of the chassis. And it looks like there were some rubber mounts here that are long, rotted away. Alright, here it is. Bit dirty, but not too much corrosion. Just a few splotches here and there. Let's better look at that dial. Not entirely sure how these bulbs are supposed to go in, but I looked at marks on the metal. It looks like they went in something like this. I'm not exactly sure. This one has me a little bit concerned because there's a wire connection here. And if I push this in, like the other one, it's getting kind of close to shorting there. But I do see some kind of scuff marks on the side. Fortunately, I can't find any photos online that are good enough to show the insides. It's a little pet peeve of mine. If you go to websites like Radio or Antique Radio Archives, plenty of photos of the fronts of the cabinets, maybe the back. You never see somebody showing you the underside of a chassis. It should be so helpful for doing these restorations. Just going to go ahead and clip these wires out. I'm pretty sure they are for the antenna. Definitely cannot be reused. Alright, so here we go. Look underneath. So some work has definitely been done. Maybe more than once, because these are fairly new type of cap. Might even be early plastic film. Not sure why this is disconnected. Yeah, it's a tone control there. Otherwise, definitely still some paper caps, some dog bone resistors, some more newer type caps down here. New electrolytic under here. Looks to be in decent shape though. So I guess this has 2 bands on it. This would be the band switch in the middle here. Here's what I found in that little bag. We've got a couple of these, which are the chassis mounts. See, this chassis has really deep pockets here for these mounts to go in. So pretty thick. And then we've got the knobs. So we have 3 of these style and 1 of these. It says tone on it. I don't know if any of these are actually original though. But for now, put them on there, give you something to work with. The fact that this doesn't even want to push on there. So, actually, there's 3 styles. These 2 are a little different. One's got a set screw and one has a spring. Sure, see this band switch will operate. Tighten the set screw down a little here. And this keeps rotating around. Back it off a little with the knobs on all one. There we go. Alright, 2 positions, cool. So, no doubt some work's been done underneath there. Hard to say what is or isn't original. I did find some service info online. This is from Nostalgia here. It's the riders. Schematic, a little blurry, but something pretty major missing from it, which is component values. Resistors and capacitors just have designators like R1, but no actual value. Well, that is separately on this parts list here. Not the easiest thing to read. Well, I went looking in my Beatman's compendium of radio diagrams and found this. It's only a 1-pager, but it's nice, concise, and easy to read. Some much clearer text here. Again, though, no component values. I went in and wrote those in by hand. And the first thing that struck me was the capacitors and the power supply. You have 2 values for C16 and C17. Those are the electrolytics. And there's a note here. Filter choke used in series at this point in first models. And there's a point right there. So, for the earlier model, they had a filter choke in addition to this, which is the field coil being used as a choke. So with 2 chokes, they were able to use smaller capacitors. This does not have that second choke, and used the larger capacitors. And it looks like whoever did this did a decent job, because I followed the wiring and the values seem to be right about what the originals were. So there's a 20 up top poking through and a 16 down below. And on here they show 18 and 14. Now, something quite confusing if you've never seen this before is look at where this choke is. So here's our 80 rectifier, 2 plates, filament, and this point right here is where you'd normally get your B plus coming off of. It would go to a filter cap, and then a choke, and then use another filter cap and B plus off to the set. Well, we definitely have a capacitor here, but that choke is actually connected to the center tap, which would normally either be going to ground or to maybe a resistor to provide some negative bias for the set. Instead, we've got center tap, capacitor, choke, and then a line going off on a resistor and then going to ground. Let's see, R15 is probably fairly small. Yeah, 235 ohm, 2 watts. So there's a resistor for negative bias, and then it's going off to a grid right there, like on the output tube. Well, there's no reason why you have to have the filter choke on the positive side. You can just as well put it in the negative side, and that's what they did in this case. So the choke is on the ground return, actually. Or, well, I guess B- would be more accurate. Whereas the ground is actually these connections here. So it could be a little tricky to wrap your head around the first time you see it, but works exactly the same way. It's just on the return path rather than on the rectifier side. Alright, so with that, got the component values written in here. This is very legible here for all the components. Got a little voltage chart here, a little tube chart, so I think I'm in decent enough shape with the schematic and the service info. And on the riders, they also have a little dial, string diagram, and some alignment info. So between those two, should be alright. Now, I already went ahead and popped out the 80 rectifier, and I examined the line cord and the plug more closely. And it's in surprisingly good condition. Good enough that I am going to plug this in. But with that 80 rectifier tube removed, what that means is we won't get any power going to the set except for the filaments. So the tube filament should light up, the dial lights should light up, and that's it. To check out the secondary, I'll put an AC voltmeter into the socket where the two plates go, and on the filament side. And I'm plugging this in to Suncor PR57 that has both a fuse and a circuit breaker. So not only tell me if the power transformer is good, but also if the wiring is intact, if the power switch is good. If you're going to try this, absolutely examine the wiring first and make sure it's connected to either a dim bulb tester or something that's fused, because it could very well be something shorted in this and I don't want to damage anything. Alright, if I could just find my meter, we can proceed with the test. Okay, here we go. The meter in AC mode. Dim the lights a bit so we can see the filaments glow. PR57's on, and radio's on. Well, hey, right away, dial lights are lit up, illuminating that. That looks about reasonable. I could see that big no way the correct position for those lights. And yeah, tubes are lighting up. It's kind of dim, kind of hard to see. But yeah, there's a filament glow. Alright, so let's check out this 80 socket here. It should have around 5 volts on the larger pins. That would be the filament. Yep, 5.15. And hundreds of volts on the secondary. Yep, 760. And remember that center tap, so you'd have about 360, 370, something like that on either leg. Alright, that all seems reasonable. So, I don't see any reason not to proceed full steam ahead. Now, in addition to not putting the component values, I also didn't put 2 pins on this, which is kind of annoying, so I went on the 66 here and wrote them in. And I think that's where I'll start, on the RF amp. And see if I can identify this capacitor and these resistors and see, hopefully, whoever's worked on this in the past did a good job of replacing a part with a part and wired it in the same place and didn't make any modifications, otherwise I could be in for a bit of a headache. I will also take my ohm meter and check out the speaker, make sure we have continuity in the field coil and the voice coil. I believe the output transformer is contained on the chassis itself and not on the speaker frame. Pretty darn sure that's what this guy is right here, so I just want to check continuity in that. And of course, the antenna coils and oscillator coils and IF coils. So far, the only issues I see are mismatched knobs and a broken off dial pointer. I got about 1,000 ohms on the field coil and 2 ohms on the voice coil. Both those seem very reasonable. So I'm going to proceed with working on this radio. I found that if I put a small piece of wood right about there, the radio balances nicely on its side. So nice and stable. Alright, so I'm just going to get right to it and start replacing all these caps and double check the resistors. Probably end up replacing all the resistors as well, and double check that all the wiring matches the service info. And let's keep our fingers crossed that every coil's got continuity. Antenna coil, oscillator coil, IF transformers, and output transformer.